The cabin looked like it had been forgotten by the world long before the veteran ever laid eyes on it, standing crooked and half swallowed by the forest as though the trees were trying to reclaim what mankind had abandoned. The wooden beams sagged under the weight of too many winters, the windows clouded by years of dust and the heavy silence of isolation. When Daniel Reed stepped out of his truck, the air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth, and for a moment he simply stood there, soaking in the quiet that wrapped around him like an old blanket he wasn't sure he trusted. He had spent a lifetime marching through noise, war zones, hospitals, crowded barracks, sleepless nights filled with voices and explosions that replayed inside his skull long after the battlefield was behind him. The stillness of the forest was almost unsettling, too calm, too slow, too honest, as though it expected him to confront every memory he had spent years trying to bury. But beside him, his service dog, Ranger, hopped down from the truck with a soft thud, sniffed the fresh air, and wagged his tail as if declaring the place safe. Daniel watched him for a moment, grateful for the dog's steady presence. Ranger had been with him through the darkest nights, through the panic attacks that left him gasping, through the moments when he didn't think he could keep going. If Ranger said the world wasn't about to collapse, Daniel tried to believe it. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the boards, casting long golden lines across the floor, like the cabin was showing him the path forward. The space was bare, except for an old rocking chair and a wood-burning stove that looked older than he was. He could almost imagine someone sitting there decades ago, reading, resting, dreaming in a world untouched by war. There was something comforting about the thought, something soft that gently tapped at a part of his heart he had forgotten existed. Ranger wandered in first, sniffing corners, checking shadows, tail wagging slightly as though he sensed more than just the physical structure. Daniel followed, placing his hand against the nearest wooden beam. The cabin felt alive in a way he couldn't explain, like it had stories etched into its bones. He wondered who had lived here before, what had driven them away, and why the property had been left abandoned for so long. The realtor had shrugged when Daniel asked about its history, muttering something about local legends and strange noises, words Daniel dismissed as folklore and exaggerations. He had seen real horrors, real ghosts, and they didn't live in old cabins. They lived in the mind, waiting for darkness and silence to crawl out from the corners. But the moment he stepped deeper inside, a cool whisper of wind brushed past his neck, though the windows were closed and the air still. Ranger's ears perked, but he didn't bark, only tilted his head as though listening to something Daniel couldn't hear. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine, not of fear, but of curiosity. He scanned the room, expecting the familiar tension that came before a panic episode, but instead he felt strangely calm, the way he used to feel before stepping into a safe zone overseas. It was as though some unseen presence acknowledged him, not as a threat, but as someone it had been waiting for. He knelt to open his duffel bag, letting Ranger circle him with soft sniffing and gentle nudges. The cabin floor creaked beneath them, the sound echoing faintly as though the walls were adjusting to the idea of being inhabited again. Daniel unpacked slowly, setting his few belongings on the floor, his movements steady, deliberate, almost ritualistic. He hadn't owned much since leaving the service. Too many things reminded him of places he wanted to forget, but he carried everything that mattered: a photograph of his old squad, a folded flag he rarely touched, and Ranger's gear. Each item felt heavier than it should, as though holding memories that weighed far more than their physical form. Outside, the wind shifted, making the trees sway and groan, and the cabin let out a soft, hollow sigh. Daniel paused, listening, his heart beating a little faster. The sound didn't scare him. Instead, it stirred something in him, like a distant memory knocking faintly. Ranger brushed against his side, grounding him again, the way he always did when Daniel's mind drifted too far into shadows. The dog sat beside him, eyes gentle, waiting for Daniel to notice that he wasn't alone. The sun dipped lower outside, casting amber light through the cracks, and Daniel felt the first hint of belonging settle in his chest. He hadn't expected the cabin to welcome him, not after years of feeling like the world had no place left for him. But there was something undeniably warm here, something that whispered of second chances and healing in ways he didn't yet understand. And though he didn't know it yet, the cabin had been waiting, holding on to a secret buried deep within its wooden heart, a secret that only Ranger would uncover, a secret that would change Daniel's life in a way he never could have imagined. The first night in the cabin was eerily quiet. Daniel lay on the old cot he had managed to clean up, the faded mattress groaning beneath him as he shifted to find a comfortable position. Ranger curled at his feet, a warm and steady presence, his chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of sleep. Daniel stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint creaks of the cabin, the distant rustling of the trees, and the occasional hoot of an owl. Normally, such quiet would have made his mind race. Images of his deployments, the faces of men lost, the sudden explosions of memory that struck without warning. But tonight, the stillness didn't frighten him. Instead, it felt like a pause, a breath drawn by the world and held out for him to join. Hours later, he awoke to a soft nudge against his shoulder. Ranger's warm nose pressed insistently into his skin, and Daniel blinked against the darkness. The cabin was not silent now. It was alive. A faint sound, a scraping, almost like someone dragging a finger along the walls, echoed faintly through the hall. Daniel sat up, muscles coiled but aware of Ranger's calm demeanor beside him. The dog's ears twitched, his tail flicked once, but he did not bark or growl. Ranger had a way of sensing more than any human could, a way of reading the unseen currents of the world, and when he remained calm, Daniel trusted him. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from the cot, trying to make as little noise as possible. The hallway stretched before him, narrow and shadowed. Moonlight spilled in through the cracks in the boards, illuminating floating dust motes that swirled like tiny specters in the quiet air. Ranger led the way, moving with deliberate precision, his paws silent against the worn wooden floor. Daniel followed, every sense alert, aware of the cabin's whispers and sighs. The scraping sound grew louder as they approached the far end of the hall, where a small door sat slightly ajar. Ranger paused, pressed his body against Daniel's leg, and let out a single, soft whine, an invitation, not a warning. Daniel pushed the door open with a slow creak, and the room beyond was revealed, a small storage space, its shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten relics and dust-covered boxes. A thin layer of cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air smelled of old wood and time long past. Ranger sniffed every inch with meticulous attention, then stopped in the corner, tail wagging slightly, eyes fixed on a particular spot near the floor. Daniel knelt, brushing away the dust and debris with careful hands. His fingers struck something solid beneath the old wooden planks, a faint thump beneath the surface that resonated like a heartbeat. Ranger dug with steady determination, his claws uncovering the earth that had crept into the corner over decades. Daniel's hands joined him, revealing a small wooden chest, its surface scarred by time, but still intact. The smell of old wood and faint perfume wafted from it, subtle and strangely comforting. He lifted it with reverent care, setting it down on the floorboards. Ranger sat beside him, eyes fixed on the chest, as though urging him to open it with the respect the moment demanded. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid, revealing contents wrapped in delicate, time-worn cloth. Inside were letters, photographs, a silver locket, and a small leather-bound diary. Each item seemed infused with the weight of love and loss, history and longing, waiting for someone to finally bear witness. He picked up the diary, its leather soft but cracked, and opened it gently. The first entries revealed the life of Margaret Sinclair, a woman who had lived alone in this cabin for decades, recording her days with care and devotion. She wrote of her family, lost to illness and misfortune, of the small joys she had found in her garden, in the changing seasons, and in the companionship of her loyal dog, a German shepherd named Thor, who had been her constant through lonely winters. The diary pages were filled with tender reflections, descriptions of sunsets over the mountains, and the simple, profound gratitude of a life lived in quiet devotion. As Daniel read, he felt a connection forming between him and Margaret, a bridge of empathy that spanned decades. Ranger nudged a folded letter next to the diary, the seal cracked and worn. Daniel unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was small but precise, every word deliberate. Margaret wrote of her hope that one day someone would come to the cabin who understood the weight of memory and the importance of remembrance. She had hidden the chest deliberately, protecting it from a world that had taken so much from her, waiting for a pair of eyes kind enough to see not just the cabin, but the life it held within. Daniel's chest tightened as he realized the gravity of the moment. He wasn't here by accident. Ranger had guided him, not to a building, not to a property, but to a story, a legacy of love, resilience, and loyalty that needed acknowledgement. The hours passed in silence. Daniel carefully examined each item in the chest, feeling the presence of Margaret in every crease of paper, every photograph, every faded flower pressed between pages. He whispered to her as he read, "I see you. I hear you. You're not forgotten." Ranger sat beside him, head resting gently against his arm, a sentinel of both the present and the past. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the sound of life, the faintest whisper of approval, as though the forest itself acknowledged that the chest had finally been found, that the story Margaret had safeguarded for so long was no longer trapped in silence. For the rest of the night, Daniel and Ranger moved through the cabin together. Each room held a memory, a fragment of a life once lived, and each corner seemed to exhale a sigh of relief at being finally witnessed. The cabin was no longer a relic of abandonment. It had become a vessel of continuity, a place where past and present intersected. Daniel realized that the haunting presence the locals had whispered about was never malevolent. It was the echo of love, of devotion, waiting patiently for someone worthy to recognize it. Ranger's gentle nuzzles and soft whines guided him from room to room, ensuring that no corner remained overlooked. And in that quiet communion, Daniel understood that the cabin had chosen him, not to scare, not to punish, but to restore what had been lost to time. By dawn, the first light of the sun poured through the dusty windows, illuminating the cabin in a golden glow. Daniel held the diary and letters close, Ranger at his side, and felt a peace he had not known in years. The cabin had revealed its secret, and in doing so, it had begun to heal him as well. He realized that this discovery, guided by his faithful dog, was not just about uncovering hidden items. It was about connecting with a life that had waited decades for acknowledgement, about honoring the unspoken promises of the past, and about finding purpose in a quiet corner of the world. And as he looked down at Ranger, whose tail wagged with gentle pride, Daniel knew without a doubt that their lives were forever intertwined with the legacy they had uncovered together. The following days passed in a strange rhythm, each moment straddling the line between discovery and reflection. Daniel woke to the soft golden light streaming through the cabin's broken windows, Ranger already alert at the doorway, tail wagging in anticipation. The dog had seemed to sense that the chest had opened a door, not just to Margaret Sinclair's past, but to Daniel's own understanding of life, loss, and hope. He had been a veteran for more years than he cared to count, and yet here, in a forgotten cabin, he felt a stir of something he thought had long been buried: purpose. Daniel spent his mornings carefully cataloging the items he had found, laying the letters and photographs across the small wooden table, smoothing the creased edges with reverent fingers. Each photograph captured a moment frozen in time: Margaret tending her garden, laughing with children long gone, sitting by the fireplace with Thor curled at her feet. The images were not just relics, they were testaments to endurance, to the quiet triumphs of ordinary life. Daniel found himself reading the letters aloud, feeling the cadence of Margaret's voice resonate in the cabin's hollow spaces, as if her words had been waiting decades to be heard. Ranger would sit close, ears flicking attentively at every sound, occasionally nudging Daniel's hand with his wet nose, reminding him that he was not alone in this process. As the days stretched on, Daniel began to explore the properties surrounding the cabin. The forest that embraced it was thick and tangled, overgrown with brambles and fallen branches, but Ranger moved through it with ease, sniffing the air, ears flicked back attentively. One morning, the dog paused at the edge of a small clearing, his nose pressed to the damp earth, and let out a soft bark. Daniel hurried over, heart racing with the same anticipation he had felt when they first uncovered the chest. Ranger's paws scraped at the soil in a steady rhythm, uncovering roots and dirt in a manner that seemed purposeful, almost deliberate. Daniel knelt beside him, joining in the effort, until the earth gave way to reveal another hidden object, a small, weathered tin box, rusted but still intact. Inside were more letters, along with delicate trinkets and a small key. The handwriting on the letters was unmistakably Margaret's, a mixture of joy, sorrow, and cautious optimism. One letter in particular caught Daniel's attention. It was addressed not to any specific person, but to the one who finds this, and it spoke of the importance of remembering those who had come before, of carrying their stories forward into the world. The key, she explained, opened a small safe hidden in the cabin's floorboards, a safe that contained the most private parts of her life, her savings, journals of dreams she had dared to imagine but never acted upon, and artifacts she had collected during her younger years. Daniel felt a lump in his throat as he realized the depth of trust placed in him, the responsibility of becoming the custodian of Margaret Sinclair's legacy. Ranger, sensing the gravity of the moment, sat quietly beside him, tail resting on the ground as though to anchor him in place. Daniel found the floorboards Margaret had mentioned, lifting the hidden trapdoor with careful hands. The safe inside was small but heavy, its metal surface etched with age and a faint, intricate pattern that spoke of craftsmanship long forgotten. He inserted the key, turning it with slow reverence, and the lid creaked open to reveal its contents. There were more letters, journals filled with reflections on life and the world, and a collection of small, handcrafted objects, carved figurines, intricate jewelry, and even a few coins from distant travels. Each item was a fragment of a life lived fully in solitude, a story waiting for recognition, and Daniel could not help but feel humbled by the trust Margaret had placed in someone she would never meet. As he examined the items, he realized that Margaret had not just been recording her life for herself, she had been creating a map of human connection, a bridge across time, a way to reach out to anyone who could understand the quiet, enduring love she had felt for the world around her. Daniel read aloud passages from her journals, and the words seemed to linger in the air, filling the cabin with a presence that was both comforting and haunting. Ranger's soft whines punctuated the silence, a gentle reminder that he too was a part of this story, a living link between the past and the present. The discovery transformed Daniel's view of the cabin. It was no longer merely a place of shelter, a roof over his head to escape the elements. It had become a sanctuary, a sacred space where the threads of two lives, decades apart, intertwined through trust, loyalty, and the unwavering presence of a faithful companion. Every corner of the cabin seemed imbued with meaning, from the worn rocking chair by the fireplace to the window ledge that overlooked the forest clearing. Daniel could almost feel Margaret's hands shaping these spaces, her eyes observing the world with careful attention, and he understood that the dog had not only led him to a physical treasure, but to a profound emotional connection that reached across generations. One evening, as the sun set and the golden light spilled through the dusty windows, Daniel and Ranger sat by the fireplace, the chest and safe opened between them, the letters and journals spread around like pieces of a puzzle. He read aloud a passage from Margaret's diary, describing a simple afternoon she had spent teaching Thor a new trick, laughing as the dog struggled to understand, but never giving up. Daniel paused, his chest tight, and looked down at Ranger, who met his gaze with steady, unjudging eyes. He realized that Margaret's words were not just a memory. They were a guide, a lesson in patience, devotion, and the quiet, transformative power of companionship. The dog had led him here, and in doing so had shown him the importance of presence, of witnessing, of embracing the small but profound connections that make life meaningful. Night fell over the cabin, blanketing the world in darkness, and Daniel felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The journey had begun with uncertainty, with shadows of the past pressing in, but it had grown into something far greater, a communion of trust, loyalty, and discovery. Ranger curled at his feet, chest rising and falling with rhythmic certainty, and Daniel leaned back against the wall, surrounded by stories and memories that were no longer lost. The cabin had revealed its secrets, and in the process, it had revealed him to himself. He understood, in that moment, that this was not just a story of a haunted cabin or a hidden treasure. It was a story of human resilience, of finding connection in the most unexpected places, and of the extraordinary bond between a man and his dog, whose unwavering guidance had uncovered not only a physical cache of memories, but a treasure far greater, the knowledge that life, even after years of silence and solitude, could still offer wonder, hope, and redemption. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life in the cabin became both familiar and transformative. Daniel woke each morning to the same golden light filtering through the warped windows, yet every day felt alive with potential, charged by the discoveries he and Ranger had made together. The forest surrounding the cabin had begun to feel less like a barrier and more like an extension of their home. Ranger would lead Daniel along winding paths between towering pines and overgrown meadows, his nose sniffing tirelessly for new signs, old scents, or hidden curiosities. There was a sense of anticipation in every step, as though the earth itself had more secrets to reveal, and Daniel followed willingly, heart open and mind alive to the mysteries of this forgotten place. Inside the cabin, Daniel had begun to reorganize the living space, integrating the relics and letters they had uncovered into an arrangement that honored Margaret's memory. The chest and safe were carefully placed against the wall, each item inside treated with reverence. Daniel read aloud from the letters each day, letting Margaret's voice, tender yet resolute, fill the cabin with warmth and life. Through her words, he learned of her small triumphs, the vegetables she had grown against harsh winters, the letters she had written to loved ones who never received them, the unrecorded joys and sorrows that had defined a lifetime. Each passage struck Daniel differently, sometimes a pang of sorrow, other times a rush of gratitude, yet always a sense of connection to a world that had existed long before him and would continue long after. Ranger's role in this journey became more than just guidance, it became a partnership. The dog had an almost uncanny ability to sense what Daniel needed, when to nudge him forward and when to let him sit in reflection. One afternoon, while the sunlight streamed across the forest floor in golden beams, Ranger paused near a cluster of wildflowers, ears tilted, tail wagging gently. Daniel approached and noticed a small mound of earth, partially hidden beneath a tangle of roots and leaves. Ranger dug steadily, uncovering an old metal box encrusted with rust, but unmistakably significant. Inside were photographs of Margaret's childhood friends, a small journal detailing her early dreams, and a delicate music box, its key long missing. The air seemed charged with history as Daniel lifted the items, feeling the weight of decades pressing gently against his palms. The journal was particularly revealing. Margaret had chronicled her days with extraordinary care, detailing her interactions with neighbors, the minor triumphs of her garden, and the companionship she had found in Thor, her dog, whose presence had provided comfort through lonely nights. Her words spoke of resilience, quiet courage, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of life despite loss. Daniel found himself reading these passages aloud to Ranger, the dog's soft whines and attentive eyes creating a rhythm that tied the past to the present. Each day brought new revelations, and each night, as he sat by the fireplace with Ranger resting at his side, he felt a growing sense of purpose, a mission to honor a life that had waited decades to be acknowledged. One evening, as the shadows lengthened and the cabin grew still, Daniel discovered a letter that would change everything. It was tucked into the lining of the music box, almost hidden, as if Margaret herself had known it required protection until the right person arrived. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, and filled with emotion. Margaret wrote of a hidden treasure, not of gold or jewels, but of a collection of personal items she had gathered throughout her life, keepsakes, letters, and photographs she wanted preserved. She had chosen to hide them within the cabin, hoping that someone with the capacity for understanding and reverence would find them. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes as he read her words. This treasure was more than a physical discovery. It was a testament to the human capacity for memory, love, and connection across generations. The following morning, Daniel and Ranger set out to explore the cabin's outer structures, curious if Margaret had hidden more of her life's treasures elsewhere. There was a small, weathered shed to the north, its roof partially collapsed and its walls streaked with the marks of years exposed to wind and rain. Ranger darted ahead, nose to the ground, and Daniel followed, bracing himself for what might be uncovered. Inside the shed, hidden beneath a pile of old tarps, they found a trunk, its leather cracked and frayed. Inside, more letters, trinkets, and photographs awaited. Daniel carefully examined each item, feeling the breadth of Margaret's life unfold before him. Through her carefully preserved belongings, he learned of the joys she had experienced, the grief she had endured, and the enduring love she had carried for the world around her. That night, Daniel sat by the fireplace, letters spread across the floorboards like a mosaic of memory. Ranger lay at his side, tail flicking occasionally as he listened to Daniel read aloud. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace, the kind that comes from understanding one's place in the continuum of life. The cabin had ceased to be a haunted relic. It had become a sanctuary, a vessel through which Margaret's voice could continue to touch the world. He realized that Ranger had not merely led him to hidden objects. He had guided him to a deeper understanding of life, love, and the quiet, persistent power of loyalty. The dog had become a bridge between past and present, a living testament to the enduring bond between humans and their companions. As dawn broke, painting the cabin in soft hues of orange and gold, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The treasures Margaret had left behind were more than artifacts. They were lessons in resilience, empathy, and the importance of honoring the lives of those who came before. Ranger nudged him gently, reminding him that their journey was ongoing, that more discoveries awaited, and that the true treasure was the connection forged between the living and those who had lived long before. In that moment, Daniel understood that his life, once defined by solitude and shadowed memories of war, had been irrevocably changed. The cabin, the treasures, and Ranger's unwavering guidance had opened a new chapter, one filled with hope, understanding, and the quiet, transformative power of presence. The days following their latest discoveries were marked by a profound sense of harmony and purpose. Daniel awoke each morning to the gentle light spilling into the cabin, the scent of pine and earth drifting through the broken windows, and Ranger's quiet, eager gaze. The dog had become more than a companion. He was a guide, a constant reminder of the simple yet extraordinary truths Margaret's life had imparted. Each item in the cabin, the letters, the photographs, the trinkets carefully hidden for decades, had become part of a tapestry that Daniel was learning to navigate, unravel, and cherish. The experience was transforming him, reminding him that life, even after immense struggle and solitude, could still unfold in moments of astonishing grace. One morning, while exploring the outskirts of the property, Ranger paused near a fallen tree, his paws scraping at the soft soil, tail stiff with concentration. Daniel knelt beside him, brushing back leaves and moss to reveal a small, weathered tin box. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing yet another set of letters and small tokens, each carrying a fragment of Margaret's history. One letter, dated nearly 50 years ago, was addressed to the one who discovers this, echoing the words of the other notes they had found. It spoke of the importance of remembering those who had come before, of learning from the lives and choices of others, and of the quiet acts of love and courage that often go unnoticed yet define a person's legacy. Daniel felt a lump in his throat, realizing the profound responsibility he had been entrusted with, not just to preserve these memories, but to honor them, to ensure that Margaret's life continued to touch hearts long after she was gone. As days melted into weeks, Daniel worked tirelessly to organize and preserve the treasures he and Ranger had uncovered. He built small shelves and containers from the wood and scraps found around the cabin, treating each letter, photograph, and trinket with meticulous care. Ranger remained a silent but vigilant partner, sitting by his side, nudging him gently when fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, and watching intently as Daniel pieced together the story of a woman whose life had been full of quiet resilience. Daniel began documenting everything, carefully noting dates, names, and connections, determined to create a record worthy of the trust Margaret had placed in whoever would find her hidden treasures. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest was bathed in soft twilight, Daniel sat by the fireplace with Ranger curled at his feet. He spread out the letters and photographs, reading aloud passages from Margaret's journals. Her words spoke of joy in the smallest things, sorrow endured with quiet dignity, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. Daniel felt a swell of emotion as he realized that her story was now intertwined with his own. Ranger lifted his head, ears perked, as if acknowledging the depth of this connection, reminding Daniel that their bond had been the key to uncovering the treasure and the story within. The following morning, Daniel decided to explore the far end of the property, an area he had previously avoided due to dense underbrush and uneven terrain. Ranger led the way with confident strides, nose to the ground, alert to every scent. They came across an overgrown path that led to a small, hidden garden behind a thicket of trees. It was clear that Margaret had once tended this space with care. Even after decades of neglect, faint traces of flowers and vegetables remained. At the center of the garden, Ranger began digging with fervor, paws sending soil flying, until they uncovered a small, rusted metal box. Inside were more letters, a delicate locket, and a faded photograph of Margaret with her beloved dog, Thor. The image captured the essence of a life lived with love, loyalty, and quiet courage. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face as he realized the depth of Margaret's intention in leaving these treasures hidden, waiting for someone with the capacity to understand and honor them. Daniel spent the next several days reflecting on the journey he and Ranger had undertaken. The cabin, the hidden letters, and the forgotten treasures had revealed not just Margaret's life, but the transformative power of human connection and companionship. He understood that the true treasure was not the physical items, but the lessons embedded within them, the importance of patience, empathy, and the enduring strength of love. Ranger, ever attentive, remained at his side, a constant reminder of loyalty, courage, and the unspoken bond between a man and his dog. Together, they had uncovered decades of history, pieced together a life long forgotten, and in doing so, had found a new sense of purpose and belonging. As the sun set each evening, casting golden light across the cabin, Daniel would sit by the fireplace, Ranger resting against his legs, reading aloud from Margaret's letters and journals. The cabin was no longer merely a shelter. It had become a sanctuary, a testament to lives lived fully, quietly, and with intention. The forest outside whispered with the memories of the past, the rustling leaves and the distant calls of birds adding a natural cadence to the human stories preserved within. Daniel realized that Margaret's life, preserved through letters, photographs, and treasured objects, was now part of his own journey. It was a reminder that even in solitude, there is connection, and even in loss, there is the potential for discovery, joy, and purpose. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and Ranger began sharing the story of Margaret's life with a small circle of trusted friends and neighbors, showing them the letters, photographs, and artifacts they had uncovered. The tale of the hidden treasures became a source of inspiration, a testament to the enduring power of human connection, loyalty, and the quiet heroism of living with integrity. Through the guidance of his faithful companion, Daniel had not only uncovered the secrets of a forgotten life, but had also rediscovered his own capacity for hope, love, and renewal. Ranger's presence had been the bridge between past and present, leading him to a treasure far greater than anything of material value. The understanding that life, in its quietest moments, is a treasure worth cherishing. In the end, Daniel understood that the cabin, the forest, and the treasures within were not just relics of the past. They were a living testament to the bond between human and animal, to the resilience of the human spirit, and to the transformative power of discovery. Ranger had led him to a hidden treasure, but more importantly, he had led him to a life renewed, a heart opened, and a future filled with purpose. Together, they had turned a haunted, forgotten cabin into a sanctuary of memory, hope, and love, a place where the past and present converged, and where the lessons of a life long gone could continue to inspire those willing to listen, to learn, and to believe in the enduring power of loyalty, compassion, and unwavering devotion.